My name is Lena Harris. I'm 31. I was standing in the middle of his dining room when he said it, loud enough for the table to go quiet. She's mine, he told everyone, his hand closing around my wrist as if it were a reminder, not a threat. I didn't pull away. I kept my shoulders folded inward the way my sister does when she's trying not to draw attention. I kept my eyes down. I let the silence stretch while his fingers tightened just enough to sting. This wasn't my marriage. But that night, I let him believe it was. That was the night I decided to ruin his life without raising my voice. If someone you cared about was in danger and no one spoke up, would you intervene or stay silent? Tell me in the comments. The table was set for a family dinner, linen napkins, heavy plates, food that had gone lukewarm while people pretended not to notice what was happening. His mother stared at her wine. His brother focused on cutting his meat. I had my sister's ring on. Her coat hung on the chair behind me. I was sitting in her place, breathing the way she'd taught me to breathe when he was watching. He leaned closer, his voice calm, almost amused. "You don't need to speak," he said. "I'll explain things for you." His thumb pressed into the inside of my wrist, right where the pulse shows. It was deliberate. Not enough to leave a mark anyone would comment on, enough that I'd feel it later. I nodded once. That was the right response. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else reached for the salt. The room shifted the way it always does when people decide discomfort is easier than intervention. He smiled then, satisfied. "See," he said to no one in particular, "she understands." What none of them knew was that I wasn't the woman he married. I had stepped into my sister's life hours earlier. I was wearing her fear like a costume, carefully measured and practiced. When he finally let go of my wrist, I reached for my water with my other hand to keep it from shaking. The glass clinked once against the table before I steadied it. He noticed. "Careful," he said softly. "You get clumsy when you're tired." I murmured an apology. It sounded right in my ears. He went back to his seat, satisfied, and started talking about work, numbers, deals, a project that had his name on it. Control presented as success. When dessert was served, he stood again. This time he rested his hand on the back of my neck, fingers spreading just enough to remind me where they could go. "Go get the coats," he said, not a request. I rose immediately. Chairs shifted as I passed. No one met my eyes. In the hallway, away from the table but not far enough to be alone, he followed. His voice dropped. "You embarrassed me earlier," he said. "You know I don't like that." "I'm sorry," I said. I kept my voice low. I kept my posture small. I kept being her. He adjusted the collar of my coat, straightening it with sharp, efficient movements. "You're lucky," he said. "Most women would need reminding." I stayed still for a few seconds after he left, long enough for my breathing to slow, long enough to register the weight of the phone hidden deep in my bag, already recording, already saving more than he realized. That was the first time that night I was sure of something. This wouldn't stay contained. Not anymore. He didn't say goodbye to anyone when we left. He just took my elbow and steered me toward the car as if the night belonged to him and the rest of us were only passing through it. I walked half a step behind, the way my sister always does. In the car, he turned the radio up without asking. Some talk program he likes, voices arguing confidently about things that don't affect them. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my thigh, heavy and still. It wasn't affectionate. It was positional. "You were quiet," he said after a few minutes. Not a question. "I didn't have much to add," I replied. I kept my tone neutral, almost apologetic. He glanced at me, then back at the road. "You used to talk more." I nodded. I let that sit. My sister told me once that disagreement makes him restless. Agreement makes him bored. Silence is safest. At a stoplight, he reached over and adjusted the mirror, angling it so he could see me better. He studied my face, looking for something out of place. I remembered to blink less, to keep my mouth soft, to hold myself the way she does when she's trying not to be corrected. When we got home, he went straight to the kitchen and started opening cabinets. I followed, staying just inside his line of sight. He hates having to look for me. "You moved the coffee," he said. "I can put it back." He closed the cabinet harder than necessary. You don't move things without asking. The rules change depending on his mood. I took the kettle off the stove before it whistled. He doesn't like sharp sounds. I set out his mug exactly where he prefers it, handle angled right. I watched his hands while he drank, the way they flexed and relaxed. Later, in the bedroom, he stood in the doorway and watched me change. Not openly, just enough to let me know he was assessing. When he finally lay down, I waited until his breathing slowed. Then I reached for my bag and slid it further under the bed, adjusting it so the zipper wouldn't catch. Inside, the phone was still warm. The recording light was off, but the files were there. Before turning off the lamp, I checked the time and the battery level. I lay on my side, facing away from him, the way my sister always does. My wrist still ached faintly where his fingers had pressed earlier. I pressed it into the mattress until the sensation dulled. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I listened carefully. The next morning, he left early. I heard the garage door lift and settle again, the sound fading down the street. I stayed in bed until the house went quiet. My sister always waits. I did the same. When I finally got up, I moved through the rooms the way she taught me to, slow, predictable, nothing out of place. I made the bed exactly as he prefers, corners tight, pillows squared. I wiped the counter twice, even though it was already clean. Then I took the phone out of my bag. I sat on the edge of the bed with my back to the door and scrolled through the recordings from the night before. His voice came through clearly. The pauses, the pressure, the way he corrected without raising his tone. I didn't replay them, I just checked that they were there. I renamed the files with dates and times. No descriptions, just numbers, clean, forgettable. Before putting the phone away, I sent a single message. It wasn't long, just a check-in, something neutral enough that it wouldn't raise alarms if it ever surfaced. The reply came a few minutes later. Short, a confirmation, a time window. I deleted the thread and powered the phone down. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer where my sister keeps old mail. Most of it was junk, already sorted the way he likes it. I flipped through slowly, careful not to bend anything. Near the back, I found a bank envelope addressed only to her. No joint name, no return address that meant anything to me. I didn't open it. I just noted it and slid it back where it was, exactly aligned with the others. I kept thinking back to the night she showed up at my door. It was after midnight. I remember because I'd already shut off the lights and put my phone face down, the way I do when I don't want to be reachable. The knock wasn't loud. It was uneven, like she'd missed the doorframe once or twice. When I opened it, she didn't step inside right away. She said my name once and then leaned forward, her weight catching on my shoulder. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. There was dried blood at the corner of her mouth. When she lifted her hand to steady herself, I saw the marks on her neck, dark, curved bruises, spaced like fingers. She tried to say something else and couldn't. Her knees gave out before I could ask a question. I didn't call anyone that night. I got her onto the couch, wrapped her in a blanket, sat on the floor until her breathing evened out. When she finally spoke, it came in pieces. Not a story, just facts she could manage. He wouldn't let go. He said I made him do it. I already knew who she meant. We grew up together, the two of us. Same face, same height, same childhood shaped by the same losses, but we were never alike in the ways that mattered. I learned early how to push back. She learned how to smooth things over. I stayed loud. She stayed kind. When she met him, that difference showed immediately. The first time I saw them together, he answered questions meant for her. He corrected her in small ways, where she'd gone to school, what she liked to eat. He held her waist a second longer than necessary, his thumb pressing in like he was checking something. I mentioned it once, casually. She went quiet for days after. They married quickly. After that, things narrowed. She left her job because the commute was unnecessary stress. They moved farther out because he wanted privacy. Phone calls got shorter. Texts came later, then not at all. When I dropped by once without warning, he stood in the doorway and told me she was resting. I heard her voice from the back of the house, calling my name, and he closed the door before I could answer. The signs stacked up in ways that were easy to dismiss one at a time. Long sleeves in summer. Flinching when I hugged her. Checking her phone before responding. Asking him if plans were okay before agreeing to anything. The moment I stopped making excuses, we ran into each other at a grocery store near her place. I reached for her shoulder from behind, and she startled hard enough to knock a box off the shelf. Her hand flew to her throat without her realizing it. She froze like that, fingers pressed to her neck, eyes wide, for a full second before she noticed what she was doing. Then she laughed too fast, too loud. "Sorry," she said, I thought you were him." That was when I knew she wasn't just unhappy. She was managing danger. On my couch that night, with her eyes swollen and her voice shaking, the pattern finally made sense all at once. Not as a series of bad moments, but as a system. Control that tightened slowly, then all at once. She fell asleep sitting up, her head against my arm. I stayed awake until morning, watching the rise and fall of her chest, careful not to move. By the time the sun came up, I understood something clearly. If I waited for him to stop on his own, I'd be waiting forever. She woke up late that afternoon. Not all at once. She drifted in and out, her eyes opening briefly, then closing again, as if checking whether the room was still safe. I stayed where I was so she wouldn't have to look for me. When she was steady enough to sit up, she asked for water. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't used it properly in a while. "I didn't trip," she said suddenly. "I know." That seemed to loosen something. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and stared at the floor while she talked. Not in order, not with emotion attached, just information she'd been carrying alone for too long. It started with rules: what time she should be home, which errands were worth the gas, who she could see without causing problems. He tracked her phone under the excuse of safety. He controlled the accounts because he was better with money. When she questioned it, he reminded her whose name was on the house, whose lawyer handled their paperwork. If she resisted, he didn't always hit her. Sometimes he just stood too close. Sometimes he took her phone. Sometimes he told her what would happen if anyone ever thought she was unstable. By the time she finished, the room felt different, not heavier, clearer. I thought about what would happen if we went to the police with what she had now. Her injuries would matter. His explanations would matter more. He'd sound reasonable. He always does. "I can't go back," she said quietly, "if he knows I told you." We sat there for a long time without speaking. I watched the way she kept her hands folded in her lap, as if making herself smaller helped. That was when the thought settled into place. Not all at once, not as a plan yet, just a recognition. He believed he owned her. He believed he knew her body, her reactions, her limits. We look the same, we always have. "I could go instead," I said eventually, "just for a little while." She turned to me slowly, her eyes sharp with fear. "No. I wouldn't be you," I said. "I'd just let him think I was." The idea sat between us, heavy, unspoken details lining up on their own. I wasn't the woman he married, but I could stand where she stood. I could wear her ring. I could follow the rules long enough to show exactly what those rules were. She shook her head, then stopped. "He'll hurt you." "He already has," I said. That was when she understood what I was really saying. We didn't decide everything then. The shape of it was already there, forming quietly, deliberately. Not revenge, exposure. We started with the rules, not the obvious ones, the small ones that shift depending on his mood, which light switches she wasn't supposed to touch, how long the shower could run before he commented, where to leave her phone when she came home so he could see it without asking. She told me how he walked when he was already irritated, how he cleared his throat before correcting her, which silences meant danger and which meant he was simply bored. We practiced how she stood when he entered a room, shoulders slightly forward, chin down, how she answered questions without adding anything extra, how she apologized without sounding defensive. She corrected me when I moved too fast, when my eyes lifted too quickly, when my voice carried weight. "Don't explain," she said. "He hates explanations." We went through the house in my head, room by room, cameras outside, one in the hallway disguised as a smoke detector. The blind spot near the laundry door where the signal drops for a few seconds, where he keeps his spare phone. She showed me how she hides things, not by concealing them, but by making them look unimportant. The second night she cried, not loudly, just enough that I could hear her breathing change. I didn't tell her to stop, I just stayed close. "I don't want you to become me," she said. "I won't," I told her, and I meant it. On the third day, we made practical decisions. We counted the money she'd been setting aside, small amounts taken over months. We split it. Half went into my bag, half stayed with her. If something went wrong, she needed to be able to leave without waiting for me. We packed her things, not everything, only what wouldn't be noticed missing. Clothes he'd already approved of, shoes that didn't draw attention. I took her coat, the one he liked because it made her look put together. When it was time, she hesitated at the door. I slipped her ring onto my finger. It fit the same. I adjusted my posture the way she'd shown me, folded inward, contained. I stepped into her life that night, I said, more to myself than to her, just long enough. I watched her lock the door behind me from the inside. Then I went back to his house. The house was exactly how she described it. Quiet in a way that didn't feel restful. The air cool, even though the thermostat read a comfortable number. Everything in its place, not because it was cared for, but because it was monitored. I unlocked the door with her key and stepped inside, pausing just long enough to let it close behind me without a sound. The entryway held nothing that belonged solely to her. No shoes by the wall, no bag on the hook. The framed photos were all of him shaking hands, him smiling beside people I didn't recognize, him standing in front of properties like proof of ownership. In the few pictures where she appeared, she was positioned slightly behind, her body angled toward him. I set my bag down where she always does. I took off her coat and hung it carefully, smoothing the sleeve that tended to bunch. Then I stood still and listened. The hum of the security system, the faint click from the hallway camera adjusting. I counted to 5 before moving again. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. Everything was labeled. Containers dated. Meals portioned according to a plan he'd made. Her handwriting was nowhere. Even the grocery list on the counter was his. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly, watching my reflection in the dark window. Same face, same shape, different tension in the shoulders. I lowered them deliberately. He came in an hour later. I heard the garage door first, then his footsteps, steady, unhurried. He stopped just inside the doorway, watching. "You're home early," he said. Yes, not an explanation, just confirmation. He looked past me, scanning the room, checking for shifts that might signal independence. His eyes returned to my face. "Did you go anywhere?" "No." A pause, then "You didn't text." As he moved through the house, he tested small things, asked where I'd put the mail, commented on the angle of a chair, noticed the way I folded a towel. I corrected each thing without defending myself, without adding reasons, just adjustments. That night, as I moved through the routine she'd taught me, I understood something clearly. This house wasn't built to hold a person. It was built to enforce a shape. And if you fit the shape long enough, no one asks whether it's killing you. The first few days followed a pattern. He corrected how I spoke. Not the words, my tone. If I answered too quickly, he told me I was impulsive. If I paused, he said I was sulking. He preferred responses that landed in the space between. When I got it wrong, he sighed loudly and shook his head, as if disappointed by something I should have known better. The rules multiplied. Which clothes were appropriate for errands, how long I could be gone before he asked for receipts, where I was expected to sit when he worked from home. If I forgot one, he reminded me. If I forgot twice, he raised his voice. If I forgot a third time, he stopped speaking altogether. That silence carried more weight than yelling. At night, he paced. Sometimes he blocked doorways without touching me. Sometimes he stood too close and waited for me to move first. I learned to shift before he had to ask. When his hand closed around my upper arm one evening, it was framed as emphasis, not anger. His grip tightened when I didn't respond fast enough. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said. I didn't pull away. I let the phone in my bag record the sound of his breathing, the change in his voice, the exact moment pressure turned deliberate. Later, alone in the bathroom, I rolled my sleeve down carefully. No marks he'd worry about. That was his skill. I found the rest slowly. A tablet synced to the security system showed more cameras than my sister had known about. One faced the driveway. One covered the side gate. Another, small and angled wrong on purpose, watched the hallway outside the bedroom. In the office, I discovered folders saved under neutral names, spreadsheets tracking her spending, screenshots of messages taken out of context, draft emails addressed to her former employer, outlining concerns about her reliability if she ever tried to return to work. One file wasn't about her at all. It was about how to make sure no one believed her if she ever spoke. I photographed everything, not quickly, clearly. I learned which nights he drank more, which mornings he checked accounts, which afternoons he forgot to lock his desk. On the fourth day, while he was out, I stepped into the laundry room and stood in the signal drop she'd warned me about, just long enough. The call was short, professional. The woman on the other end didn't interrupt. She asked for dates, for confirmation, for whether I was safe right now. I answered carefully, yes, for the moment. When we hung up, my hands shook once. I pressed them flat against the washing machine until they steadied. That evening, he was restless. "You've been distracted," he said, circling me as I set the table. "You think I don't notice? I'm trying to do better." He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel his breath. Trying isn't the same as obeying. His fingers brushed my jaw, testing. I kept my face still. Later that night, I reviewed the files again. The recordings were clean. The photos were clear. The patterns were undeniable. But the message I received, after sending a secure upload, was brief. Strong documentation, not complete yet. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to him move through the house like he owned the air itself. By the 6th day, his control was fraying, at least in the way he showed it. He came home earlier than usual, the scent of whiskey on his breath before the keys even hit the counter. His gait was heavier, uneven. His voice was sharper. Small corrections became louder, longer, harsher. He leaned over my shoulder while I set out the table, fingers tapping against the wood like drum beats. "You're careless," he said, not looking at me. "Do you think I won't notice?" "I'm being careful," I replied, quiet, controlled like she would. He slammed a cabinet door behind me. Not hard enough to break, just enough to let everyone in the house know he could. His hand closed around my wrist and he pulled, sharp and impatient. I stayed long enough for him to say what he thought no one would ever hear, and he escalated when he realized control was slipping. "Come here." I let my body follow the familiar line of force. He stopped near the living room, still holding my wrist, his grip firm but lazy with alcohol. "You think I didn't notice you lately," he said, "that quiet act." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch just a second longer than usual. That's when I stepped back, not fast, not dramatic, just enough that his hand slipped from my skin. He frowned, confused more than angry. "What are you doing?" I lifted my eyes, met his gaze fully. "You don't like that," I said evenly. Something in his expression shifted, not fear but irritation. He scoffed. He laughed once, sharp and dismissive, and dropped onto the couch. "You always do this when you think too much," he said. "You forget your place." I stayed standing, calm still. "You needed discipline," he continued, voice loose now, confident. "That's not abuse, that's structure." I reached into my bag slowly and set the phone on the table between us. Screen down, recording already running. "I gave you everything," he went on. "Rules aren't cruelty, they're necessary. You make mistakes when I don't guide you." He looked up at me then, searching for the reaction he was used to: fear, apology, collapse. He didn't find it. "You see," he said, gesturing vaguely, "this is why no one would believe you. You don't even understand what I did for you." I let the words land, every one of them. Ownership, justification, control. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. "You said that no one would believe her." The word "her" landed wrong. He sat up straighter, squinting at my face, really looking now. Something in his certainty faltered. I flipped the phone over so he could see the red dot. He didn't reach for it. He didn't shout. He just stared. And in that moment, he understood. Not that he was in danger, but that his voice, his logic, his confidence had already done the damage. For the first time, the room wasn't shaped around his control. It was shaped around evidence. The knock came just after the confession. It hadn't been immediate. I had made the call earlier, after uploading everything and answering the first round of questions. There had been a wait, clarifications, a request that I stay where I was and not confront him further. By the time the knock came, statements had already been started somewhere else. I hadn't confronted him yet, not because I wouldn't, but because I wanted everything ready. Now it was quiet, firm, and final. I opened the door to uniformed officers, the advocate sitting just behind them, holding the files I had uploaded securely over the past days. Not all of it was clean. Some audio was muffled. Some files overlapped. But the patterns repeated: dates, language, control, enough that no one needed a single perfect moment to understand what had been happening. He was still on the couch, dazed, realizing the moment had arrived too late. Money, threats, the carefully constructed intimidation, all irrelevant now. The officers moved efficiently. After statements were taken and the recordings reviewed, one officer cuffed his wrists while another read him his rights. He muttered fragments of protest, but no one listened. He tried at first. He said I was confused, that I'd misunderstood him, that I'd taken things out of context. When that didn't work, he went quiet and asked to speak only through his attorney. It didn't change the direction things were already moving. His lawyer didn't arrive right away. He asked for one, repeatedly. It took time, long enough for officers to separate us, long enough for paperwork to begin, long enough for his certainty to drain out of him as he realized this wasn't something he could talk his way through. I watched him stand, escorted out of the house, flanked by 2 officers, his body slumped under the weight of what had finally caught up to him. Inside, the house felt different immediately. The air was still. The walls, once lined with his authority, now seemed empty of it. The photographs, the labeled containers, the carefully monitored spaces, they remained, but the controlling presence was gone. I walked through the rooms slowly, checking locks, adjusting blinds, making sure she could walk in without fear. The envelopes, the hidden cash, the bus ticket, all still in place, waiting for her. No one spoke loudly. The process was factual. The removal quiet, the doors shut behind the officers with soft clicks. By the time the last uniform left, the house was silent. The control he had wielded for years dissolved as easily as his absence allowed. She hadn't said much since the officers left. She walked through the living room once, slow and careful, then stopped. He always said it wasn't abuse, she said. She exhaled steady. Now I know what it was. I sat down on the couch he had occupied, breathing in the quiet. Everything that had been enforced, monitored, or manipulated was gone. The balance had shifted, and it was final. If this had been your sister, and everyone else had stayed silent, would you have stepped in, or would you have walked away too?